I was 3 weeks out of the Marines, trying to settle back into civilian life in a quiet, sun-baked neighborhood in North Carolina. The kind of place where people trim their hedges with obsessive precision and argue about mailbox colors at HOA meetings. My porch had become my safe spot. Just me, a rocking chair, and the hum of cicadas. I didn't need much. After 2 tours overseas, I'd learned to appreciate peace, however small. That porch, with its worn planks and chipped paint, felt like the only place where my nerves stopped buzzing. Then came Karen. I hadn't even met her when she first started complaining. She left notes. Porch clutter violates HOA policy. Clutter? A folded flag, a few boots by the door, and a mug of coffee. That was my crime. She said I was lowering the neighborhood standards. I didn't respond. I figured she'd lose interest. But Karen doesn't lose interest. She escalates. And she escalated hard. It was a Thursday morning when she finally confronted me. I was mid-sip of my coffee when I heard that voice, sharp, condescending, and entirely uninvited. You need to remove yourself from that porch. It's a shared visual space. I stared at her, wondering if I was hearing things. Excuse me? I asked, standing slowly. That porch is part of the community aesthetic, she snapped. We have a reputation to maintain. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I knew her type, authority with no stripes. Well, I said, stepping down, you picked the wrong porch today. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what your neighborhood Karen is like. The next morning, I thought maybe it was over. Karen had strutted back to her beige, plastic-shuttered house like she'd won something. But I figured she got a little power trip and would move on. I was wrong. Dead wrong. I was sanding down a small cedar box on the porch, something I was carving for my niece, when I heard footsteps stomping across my gravel path. I didn't even look up. I could already feel it, the heat of entitlement radiating before she spoke. I warned you, Karen snapped, arms crossed so tight it looked painful. Now I'm filing an official complaint. And if you don't vacate the porch during daylight hours, I will involve the board. I set the sandpaper down slowly. Vacate the porch? I repeated calmly. That's right. You're not allowed to occupy it like that. It's unsightly. She actually used the word occupy like I was staging some kind of protest. I looked down at myself. Plain gray shirt, jeans, boots. Nothing flashy, nothing wrong. I wasn't blasting music. Wasn't even talking to anyone. Just sitting and existing. Is this because of me? I asked, or because of the uniform I used to wear? Her face twitched, just for a second. I don't care who you used to be, she spat. You live here now, and that comes with rules. I didn't answer her. Instead, I stepped back onto the porch, sat down in my chair, and looked past her like she wasn't even there. That's when she did it. She took out her phone and started filming me, narrating loudly. This man is loitering, possibly unstable. He's been hostile. I fear for my safety. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was painting me like a threat. In my own yard. And all I could think was, this wasn't about rules. This was about control. I didn't move. Not when she kept filming. Not when she threatened to document the escalation. Not even when she said she was calling the HOA board and the sheriff's office. I just sat there, watching the sky turn that dull southern gray, quiet and still, like I'd done 100 times before. But inside, my pulse was crawling up my throat. She left eventually, muttering about violations and hostile energy. I stayed put until I heard her front door slam. Then I stood up, walked inside, and locked my door, hand steady, breath even. I'd faced things overseas that still woke me up at night. But this was the kind of battle I wasn't trained for. It wasn't about bullets or tactics. It was about image manipulation and the subtle kind of warfare that hides behind smiles and homeowner bylaws. So I made a call, not to the sheriff, not to the HOA. I called my guys. 2 hours later, I heard the crunch of tires on my driveway. I stepped outside, and there they were, 4 of them, my old unit. All of us discharged within a year of each other. We hadn't been in the same place since Kabul. But one text from me, And they showed up without hesitation, without asking why. That's the kind of bond you don't explain. You live it. They brought folding chairs, a cooler, and stories. God, the stories. We sat in a loose circle on my porch like we used to sit around rusted fire barrels under desert skies. Talking low, laughing loud, letting the weight of the world lift for a minute. And I'll never forget the look on Karen's face when she peeked through her curtains and saw 5 large men in uniform shirts, sitting where she said I wasn't allowed to be. I raised my coffee mug to her window and smiled. You want to see what happens next? The next morning, we were still on that porch, laughing, swapping war stories, catching up like no time had passed. One of the guys, Alvarez, even brought donuts from a place an hour away, just because he remembered I liked the maple ones. That's the kind of thing that sticks with you. Real respect, real brotherhood. Karen stepped out around 9 a.m. sharp. Same time as always. Clipboard in one hand, iced coffee in the other, sunglasses perched like she was walking into battle. She stopped in the middle of her walkway when she saw us again. I watched her jaw clench, so tight it could have cracked concrete. She didn't say a word. Just marched down the sidewalk like she hadn't spent yesterday yelling at me for daring to breathe too hard on my own porch. But she wasn't done, not by a long shot. By noon, a letter had been taped to my door. A notice of HOA infraction, citing unauthorized gatherings, noise levels, and non-conforming attire visible from the street. I handed it to Harris, who snorted. Non-conforming attire? He said. We're wearing jeans and T-shirts. What are we supposed to wear? Cloaks? I laughed, but inside I was fuming. That porch was on my property. The men with me were invited guests. And if Karen or the HOA wanted to test just how non-conforming I could get, they were about to find out. We decided to stay posted. Not in protest, just in presence. Calm, steady, unbothered. And like clockwork, Karen came back that evening. This time with 2 board members in tow. Matching polos, clipboards, and the smug kind of confidence that comes from thinking you're in charge. Sir, one of them began, we've had some complaints. But I didn't let him finish. I stood, slow and deliberate, and said just 4 words. You're on my porch. The shorter one, name tag, said Bradley, cleared his throat and tried again. This porch is visible from the street and subject to neighborhood standards. You're in violation of... I cut him off with a look. Not loud, not aggressive, just calm and direct, like we were back in briefing mode. You filed this porch under common visual domain, right? I asked. He nodded. Yes, sir. Then I suggest you get your tape measure, I said, because my property line runs exactly to the edge of that second step, which means everything you're standing on is mine. Bradley hesitated, glancing at Karen like he needed backup. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, lips pressed together so hard they turned white. Harris leaned back in his chair, arms behind his head. We can move inside if you prefer, he said, but we're staying. We're not violating anything, and we're not hurting anyone. Karen finally spoke. You're making people uncomfortable. Good, Alvarez said without missing a beat. Maybe it'll remind them what respect looks like. That's when I realized this wasn't about the porch. It never was. It was about control, about the way Karen strutted around like she was queen of the cul-de-sac, making up rules as she went. She wasn't used to being told no, so we sat there. And for the first time since I moved in, I felt home, not because of the house, but because of the men beside me, because of the silence we held, not angry, not loud, just present. The HOA board left a promise to discuss further action. Karen stormed off behind them. We stayed until the sun dipped behind the trees. No words, no raised voices, just presence. And it rattled them more than yelling ever could. It was a quiet Sunday morning when it happened. Sun barely up, dew still clinging to grass, birds chirping like nothing was wrong in the world. I was on the porch with just one of the guys, Santos. The rest had headed back to their towns, jobs, families. But Santos, being local, stayed behind. Said he wanted to keep me company a little longer. Said something about the way Karen looked at us didn't sit right with him. He was right. because at exactly 7:14 a.m., a patrol car rolled up. I wasn't surprised. Santos raised an eyebrow but didn't move. We both stayed seated, coffee in hand, quiet. Calm. The officer got out slow, one hand on his belt, the other holding a clipboard. Morning, he said. Got a call from someone on the HOA. Said there's been some ongoing disturbances here. Wanted us to check it out. I looked him in the eye. Disturbance being? He shrugged, almost apologetic. Didn't say. Said you were intimidating neighbors, causing concern. Santos let out a low breath. So, coffee and porch sitting is a felony now. The officer actually cracked a smile. Look, I'm not here to escalate anything. You're not doing anything illegal. I just have to make contact. Check the box. I nodded. Well, you've made contact. You need anything else? Nope, he said, glancing around. Looks peaceful to me. And then Karen came out. Bathrobe, slippers, cell phone already filming. There he is, she said loudly, pointing at me like I was a threat. That's him. He's the one. The officer blinked. Ma'am, I just spoke with him. He's not violating anything. Karen's jaw dropped. He's got people coming and going, military men with weapons. No weapons, Santos said calmly. Karen looked between us, sputtering. I don't feel safe. You're free to go inside, the officer said. No laws being broken here. And just like that, she was the one dismissed. The day after the cop visit, I showed up at the HOA office. Uninvited, unannounced, and unshaken. Khaki shorts, plain t-shirt, folder in hand. No uniform. No brothers beside me. Just me, because I wanted them to see I didn't need a unit behind me to stand my ground. The receptionist, a woman with a tight bun and tighter smile, barely looked up. Do you have an appointment? Nope, I said, but I've got documentation. I placed the folder on the counter, gently, and I'm filing a formal grievance against Karen Myers and this board for harassment, abuse of authority, and unlawful attempts to regulate private property. She blinked. You'll need to fill out. Already did, I said, tapping the front page. Inside that folder were dated photos, printed HOA bylaws, video stills, timestamps are filming me, and even a copy of the officer's report saying no laws were broken. It wasn't loud. It wasn't emotional. It was cold, precise, military sharp. That's how you fight people like her. Not with yelling, but with paper cuts that add up. That afternoon, I got a call from a board member. Not Bradley this time. Someone quieter, older. I read your report, he said. And I just want to say, not all of us are on her side. What she did wasn't right. Then do something about it. I replied. He paused. We've called an emergency meeting. Later that week, I walked into that HOA meeting room with my shoulders square and my silence louder than any speech. Karen was there too, of course, sitting near the front, lips pursed like she just sucked a lemon. She didn't know it yet, but the board was finally listening, and I had one more move up my sleeve. The HOA meeting was packed. Folding chairs lined the room, a table of board members at the front, and neighbors filing in like it was Sunday service. Word had gotten around. Something about Karen, a porch, and a Marine who wasn't backing down. I stood against the wall near the back, calm but alert. Karen sat front and center, flanked by her usual enablers, practically vibrating with anticipation. She thought this was her stage. But it wasn't. They opened the meeting with the usual scripted fluff, community updates, landscaping contracts, pool repairs. Then came the open concern segment. Karen's hand shot up like a kid desperate to tattle. She launched into her monologue about unauthorized gatherings, security threats, and disturbances on public-facing property. It was half performance, half paranoia. But just as she started to name me directly, the door opened, and in walked my guys, not in combat gear, not in dress blues, in crisp matching polos embroidered with our unit number. Straight backs, steady eyes, quiet strength. You could feel the room shift. Harris stepped forward and addressed the board. We're here because our friend has been targeted, harassed, misrepresented. He invited us to his porch, a porch he owns, and we came in peace. But someone decided that peace looked too much like power. There was a stillness in the room that Karen couldn't cut through. Santos added, "None of us are here to cause problems. We've seen enough of those overseas. But when one of ours gets bullied on American soil, we show up." Karen sputtered, "This is intimidation. You're trying to scare the board." "No, ma'am," Alvarez said gently. "We're reminding you what respect looks like." The board said nothing at first, but they were listening, really listening, and that was all we needed. The room emptied slow, like people didn't quite know what to say, didn't know whose side to stand on without looking over their shoulder first. But the shift had happened. You could feel it. The silence that followed my unit speech said more than any gavel or bylaw ever could. Karen didn't look at me as she left, didn't speak, just gathered her clipboard and slinked out like the air had gone out of her campaign. She had tried to shame me into silence, and now she couldn't even hold eye contact. The very next morning, a board member knocked on my door. Not Bradley. This one was different. Quiet, respectful, tired looking the way people are when they've been pushed into things they never want to be part of. "We had a vote last night," he said. "Private, off the record, but unanimous." He handed me a letter. Inside, it said the HOA would be dropping all complaints, removing any record violation, and reviewing Karen's status on the board. No apology, but that wasn't the point. They were backing off. Later that week, I got word from a neighbor that Karen was taking a break from board duties, which everyone knew was HOA speak, for she got benched. Her influence dried up quick. The same people who used to nod along with her complaints now crossed the street when she walked by. Funny how fast loyalty evaporates when power does too. But here's the part that really stuck with me. I started getting small nods from folks I barely knew. The guy with the lawn signs and political bumper stickers nodded at me from his porch. The older woman who always kept her curtains drawn left banana bread on my doorstep with a note that just said, "Thank you for holding your ground." Sometimes the wind isn't loud. It's quiet, like the sound of your own porch finally feeling like home again. A week passed. Then, too, the porch stayed quiet, just the way I liked it. No notes, no surprise inspections, no Karen, period. Word had it she was stepping away from HOA duties to focus on personal matters. I didn't celebrate it, didn't gloat. I just poured my coffee, took my seat, and looked out over the same street that used to feel like a trap. Now, it felt like mine again. The guys stopped by one more time. Just the three of them this round. No statements, no symbols. Just old friends, a cooler, and a couple of folding chairs. We didn't even talk about Karen. Didn't need to. We talked about real life, new jobs, kids, dreams we hadn't spoken out loud in years. And when the sun dipped low behind the oaks and cicadas kicked up, we sat in silence, the kind that comes from knowing you earned your rest. Across the street, a few neighbors waved. One even crossed over, an older man I'd only ever seen from a distance. Said his name was Dave. Said he watched it all unfold and wished he'd stepped in sooner. "You reminded me," he said quietly, "that sometimes doing nothing makes you part of the problem." I shook his hand, told him it wasn't too late to start doing the right thing. That night, I stayed on the porch long after the streetlights flickered on. I thought about how something as simple as a wooden porch could become a battlefield, how people try to control others in the name of rules, how fear dresses up as decorum. But mostly, I thought about the value of showing up for yourself, for your peace, for the quiet corners of the world that no one else is fighting for. That porch is mine, and it'll stay that way, always,